What do you get when you drop a wildlife photographer in the middle of a fashion runway show where he's never been before? And yeah, welcome to my world, Phil. So Phil from Wildlife Dreams has joined me for day one at the Estonian Fashion Festival. And let's say he got his first taste of what fashion photography is really like. There's no calm forest, Phil. There was no patient owls, just elbows, egos, and chaos on a concrete floor, or in our case, a former Soviet Union building shoe factory. Welcome to the Loud Lens, where we don't glamorize the creative industry. We drag it into light and spill the secrets. How are you feeling, Phil, this morning? Genuinely.
Good. So, no, it was a fantastic day. I think it was very interesting how almost the two worlds of wildlife photography and fashion photography became one.
I don't see how you saw that. I'm gonna just put it out there. No, I'm used to the madness. You're used to calmness. I think when I saw you, every time I looked over, you were like, You were obviously. I'm not saying you weren't competent photographer. Please understand that's not what I'm saying. I think you're used to a certain behaviour. That's how I put it. Right. Please understand. I'm not slating the show. I'm not doing it. This is very, very, very commonplace when it comes to fashion photography, particularly in the runways. So you spend years doing wildlife photography, right? So you're used to sitting in hides. You've got patience. You've got quietness. You've got your long lenses. And then you get into a fashion show where you don't even have 2 feet of space to move, and you're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to really do anything. You got to find, and then in fact, let's talk about finding our spot, because it wasn't a case of like you show up at the hide and find a spot, is it? It's a case of nobody seemed to know where to put us, even though we were booked to be there.
Yes, that's the crossover because I, my hide here is very luxurious,
Yes.
but there are lots of hides where I've just been in even smaller
Yeah.
space. Nowhere to go to the toilet. You have to be patient. If you're doing golden eagles,
Hmm.
you have to arrive before dawn.
Yeah.
So it could be 3 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
and the golden eagles might not turn up until dusk. So then that is actually 14 hours in a hide with nothing to do because you're waiting for this bird. So you getting there at 1 o'clock and having runways and not moving.
It's not too distant.
That was.
How did you find the whole, "This is somebody else's space, you can't stand there," even though they weren't there yet?
Well, you get that sometimes with
Do you?
photographers.
I think people don't realise, so some of the things about fashion photography, so for you guys who've never done runway or maybe only done a few, when you do, I don't wanna say proper, but when you do a lot of runway shows that aren't like someone just randomly put one on. They're organised. Well, I say organised. They are organised, but they still feel like chaos on the day. It's quite typical for certain photographers to have their space. So, for example, there was a photographer of the fashion show. He had his space,
Yes.
and typically you're not allowed in that space. Now, they did ask if we wanted to be in there, and I said to you, why would you want to put us? We're all going to have the same shot. There wasn't also room for us to be in there. Let's be frank about that. And so we said, "Do you mind if we find somewhere else?" And luckily, they said actually agreed with us that we'd all end up with the same shot. That does not work if you're trying to promote your fashion. So I get it. Normally, yeah, if you're at a fashion show, you'd all be in the same pit. You just have to work with what you got, and you'll work with different publications. But because they hired to get different variety, you can't put us all in the same space. So even though we'd secured our spaces after much discussion and having to have them pre-approved, which was a bit mad because we had to sit, we weren't allowed to stand, and we had to be not distracting. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Then randomly, other photographers arrived who were, in my eyes, I would say, are late.
No, they were late.
They were late. There was one jostling with people. There's a reason why people are late. There's a reason why people are late. But then they didn't have to do anything we had to do, did they? So maybe the activity is show up late, but then we got the better spots, I think. Is that the
Yeah.
balance?
No, in prep is huge. And it doesn't matter whether you're a fashion photographer, whether you're a landscape photographer, whether you're a wildlife photographer. You need to know where the best position is, where the light's coming from, and yeah, there were several photographers that you thought, Oh, okay. Never mind. But the interesting thing,
God.
what was how photographers were treated. The light in the background. So with wildlife photography, we're always looking for a clear background. We're always looking for the best light. And because we want to sell an image,
Mhm.
um, and also that we're actually often treated quite like royalty because actually they know, you know, this is going, you know, you're trying to sell their product. They want to give you the best experience and make sure that you have the best light and the best images. So when you go into a magazine or onto social media or whatever, the images pop and you go,
But how did that compare yesterday then? See, that's where I said it's such a different beast.
it was a beast that there were.
How did you notice how you're not treated like royalty? I'm not saying you're the opposite, but you're not treated like royalty.
No, 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 no. We were definitely not treated like royalty, and I think our stick maybe to being treated like royalty. I really.
But I just say we weren't treated horribly. I want to disclose that this is very normal and standard. But this is, I think, one of the reasons why fashion photography runway is not for the faint of heart. People think it's I think a lot of it is the runway. Like, if you get a good position, you can get a good shot. You have to forgo the fact that one of the things is that lighting. They light for the atmosphere, not necessarily for the good images. Okay, which is something that does shock people because they want the ambiance to look good. So sometimes that's low lighting, or in one of the cases I went to, they had strobe lighting. So you had to just shoot and spray and hope you got something in one of the shows I've done. But you were quite shocked at the kind of lighting, weren't you? That it wasn't all like how you imagined. The backgrounds let's paint the picture, to be honest. We were in a working shoe factory. So there are industrial sewing machines at one side. There is breaking plaster on the other side. This building is old. I mean, let's not even talk about the toilet situation because I sent you a video of it and it was hilarious, wasn't it?
It was.
But this is what it is. It's about the atmosphere and the ambience of what this is. When you do fashion photography on the runway, sometimes you are playing with those massive ISOs, and sometimes you don't have the clean background that you need.
It was other photographers that were actually in the back of your shot that didn't know photography etiquette. And they it was supposed to be in a pit or where you'll stand, and then you suddenly get
And not stand up, that's what we were told.
and not stand up, and then you have other photographers that stand up and get in the background. Um,
I had one person who I know I'm in all their shots because I was sat down and she chose to sit where punters were meant to sit. I think she was all right to sit there, but I'm in all of her shots because I felt the camera on me and I feel really bad because I've got very bright red hair. Um, but of the thing I think the thing that shocked you a little bit was the fact that it, we weren't like, oh yeah, what are you doing here? It was kind of that, wasn't it? I mean, they need our images, they need our video cover, they need it. But at the time of the show, the most important thing is the punters and the models walking down. We are very much an afterthought. And I think this is something that fashion photographers don't necessarily, when they're getting into this industry, understand. If you're shooting runway, you, to a lot of people, are a necessary item that they just don't want to think about because they need to make space for as many punters on the catwalk as they can. They don't necessarily think about where to position photographers or where to put the videographers.
and I think half the problem is none of them have been photographers. So
But they don't need to be, do they?
no, but our skill is very unique, and not everyone can be a photographer.
No, but as a director, he is director of the show or a organizer of the fashion show. The thing is, they don't they had one place for their pro photographers, yeah?
Yeah.
And I will be frank, I would not want to shoot in that position where they were. It was the shortest runway part because it did a little loop, didn't it? Like a little circuit. There was no natural light coming in, and there wasn't enough normal light that they had put in to really illuminate.
No,
And I heard him say, one of the guys who was working there, not the main guy, saying, "Oh, this is hard." Whereas where we were, pretty good. We had quite a lot of light coming in. We had the window behind you, window behind me. It wasn't awful, the lighting.
No.
But I mean, the other thing is, there's certain things that I pick up on as someone who's done a few catwalks, that you know, you can tell when someone who's never attended a fashion show. That's the thing. And also, photographers, there's a big etiquette in fashion photography. When you attend the runway, if you're sitting on the front row, sometimes called the fro, right? That you don't cross your legs. You either cross at the ankle and tuck them under, or you sit with both feet planted on the floor. One, because the runway itself is very narrow normally. Secondly, your massive shoe will fill any photographer's thing and it will encroach on the space. The amount of times models had to swerve round people because people didn't think, oh, I better put my foot down. I have got one person's shoe in so many of my images because even when I angled myself, it seemed his foot was getting further and further out. And at one point, I know that when I've been at other shows, photographers have shouted at people, put your foot down, put your foot down. But I'm in Estonia and I don't know the Estonian put your freaking foot down. And also that's something that this is just nuances that you pick up on, right? He obviously didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue, so it's not his fault. But it's these little things that you're like, oh no. And often when you come to fashion shows, you get given like a space and you put your name down on the space or you put your bag there and you stay. Okay. Sometimes there's a reserved space and they might be for Getty or whoever. You do not step into that space. You're not allowed to claim that. Okay. And I thought it was really funny that even though we had our spaces booked out, I got asked by someone who was a latecomer to move. Do you remember her?
Yes.
And I was like, to where? That literally the show is 2 seconds off starting. And the woman said, well, I want to be here. And I said, well, I know, but there's nowhere for me to go. And I'm not moving. I'm not trying to be rude. But if there's 2 seconds to go and you're just showing up, and I'm like, and this is what I mean, quite cutthroat. And I don't think when people get into the fashion to do runway, they realise just how, I don't want to say like harden up, but you're an afterthought for most people. And I think that's quite hard for people to understand. Like, because the fashion industry needs your images, they need your videos, but you are an afterthought when it comes to the actual show. You'll show up and you'll be like, hi, I'm here to wreck it. And they're like, why? And you're like, well, because I need to know where I'm standing. You can just stand over there. And you're like, but you want pictures of the clothes, right? And so we had to find our own, didn't we? And I had to come up with multiple places for us.
Yeah, and again, I think that's partly them not being photographers. It was good guests getting early because they did the rehearsal 4 times. So you could actually see where the models were going. So that's almost a bit like an osprey coming into fish, and there is a hide.
I love that you can put any animal in on this.
Yeah, well, of course. That where you go and photograph ospreys coming in. And the 2 best places are at the end. And you just file it in left to right. So no one wants to be the first because they know that the osprey always fishes in the one spot.
Yeah.
And for me being a first-time virgin, like a virgin. Sorry, we're not going to go that song again.
Ugh, just think my eardrums are burnt.
I know, especially at this time of morning.
I should say it's barely, well, we're recording this 6 o'clock UK time. Do you know that? But we're in Estonia, so it's 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
It's stunning.
And I'm waiting for my gossip to come.
Okay, but back on track to the podcast.
So I could suddenly go after watching what's happening on the second rehearsal. I could then put my focal length and right, the model is going to turn here. I'm going to get that shot.
But then they didn't on the day, on the actual show.
No, but we had our rehearsal photographs.
So this is the thing. I always try and show up for at least a rehearsal because sometimes, like, typically when you do a show, they'll have a set path that people walk, except not always. And even when they do the plan in rehearsal, it will be different sometimes on the actual catwalk. We also discovered that, well, I think you found out as well, was that the lighting for the rehearsal was not the same lighting for the show. There was a lot more smoke. There was a lot more LED going on. And the light kept changing outside because they had natural light coming in. So occasionally we had this blazing sun come through, then heavy rain clouds. It is hard. And then you have to capture it. Aren't you glad that foxes don't wear sunglasses? I mean, give it time. Give it time. Fashion trends might end up going out into the wilderness.
This is it.
So let's talk about people. right? Now, fashion does attract a certain kind of personality. And in fact, I won't say that, certain kinds of personalities, okay? You've got the people who show up at the show and they are strutting like they own it and they're queens, and I love them. Then you've got people who are a little bit more quiet and introvert, but they're equally as inspiring and influential in the fashion industry. And then you get the influencers who are very much fashion. Then you get the ones who are there, perhaps. I think I see this more. I've seen this more in the UK than I have in Europe when I've been photographing on the for the runway shows. People there who are there just for clout, and they will literally don't mind. Everyone else does though. They don't mind that they'll stand in the middle of the runway and take selfies and make up they're there for something, and everyone's just looking at them. That's kind of, but I'm all for it because it's quite a nice people watching. It's my bird watching equivalent. That's what it is. See, I'm trying to put it in. And then, you get in. Now, we didn't come across many egos at all, did we? Let's be frank, there wasn't any. Like, was there? Other than maybe mine? I don't know.
What?
Do you see any egos?
Egos.
If you have to think about it, then we didn't.
No,
We didn't.
Not really. No. Actually, probably the two biggest egos were you and me.
Well, we didn't even have any egos.
Okay, fine. Diva.
Where's Eva? I hope I didn't have an ego.
No, but I just think that we
No, I had an ego.
actually we actually really stood out as professionals, and within that,
Probably except when you started waffling to people about your wildlife photography when they were trying to set up a fashion show. That was probably a bit of a let's not talk about this right now situation. Yeah, let them focus on that, not your osprey obsession. Sorry, consort. I have to say that this is one of the places where there wasn't a click. There wasn't, and I really like that. Now, I know people don't. This is something that people don't often want to talk about. There are cliques in all walks of fashion, all walks of photography,
Yes.
and fashion is one where sometimes it's a little bit more evident. Okay, and I've seen that. This show did not have it. This show was lovely in terms of direction. Everyone was really friendly to us. There was a few tense moments where not rude, please understand, not rude. Tense moments where people were getting closer to the show opening, and they would try and do rehearsals. And once we were in our position, we couldn't really get out because they kept doing rehearsals. They didn't want anyone walking when they were doing rehearsals. And then randomly, some people would walk in and start putting banners up. Do you remember? And we were like, oh, okay. And I remember I had to dash to the loo. We won't talk about the loos. We won't talk about the loo situation because I want to blanket that from my head. And it was in between, wasn't it? A runway show, the rehearsals. And I was like, I'm never going again. I'm just going to hold on for dear life if I ever need to go. But it was fine. I don't think it was terrible. Now, Phil, let's, in all honesty, how do you think you got the images that you needed for the client brief?
I didn't really get client brief.
Exactly. So when it comes to runway fashion, I often get told just to shoot the garments, yeah? So that could be the whole body, a bit of the makeup design, maybe an accessory, okay? Due to the fact that the lighting of it, did my best, you did your best, we've uploaded them, they are done. Do you wish that you had a bit more of a specific brief as you were a new one coming into this job?
Yes and no.
Don't leave large pauses on a podcast. People think it's not working.
Oh. Yes and no, because
That's not an answer.
No, I will give the answer.
Like a
Because
politician.
if I'm giving, right, I want to capture this image,
Mm-hmm.
and if I can't do it, and it's not because of my photography skills, it's because of lighting and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel that I've not done my job.
Right.
Where I wasn't giving any brief, so I actually just shot my own style, very close up. I've done some lovely portrait shots, movement, and they can't then suddenly go, well, you haven't delivered what we want, because I actually wasn't given any direction. Where I've been to when I was on the Falkland Islands.
Okay. I've been there.
for the Falkland.
Probably different reasons.
Yeah, I was there for the tourist board.
Yep.
They gave me a 6-page list of everything that they wanted to photograph, and it had to be done.
I don't think I have ever been given a brief for a fashion runway. The brief is, please shoot my runway show. So you shoot the runway show. Sometimes that is shooting the fro, as I told you, all the link on the front row, the reactions to the collection coming down, the models, particularly, and I hate this bit, but it is if a model stumbles. Or something happens. If, like, say for example, I didn't shoot this, but you might remember when you probably won't feel because I don't think it's in your viewing. It's not in your must watch thing. The Victoria's Secret model catwalk show, which isn't something I photograph, obviously. There was a very famous bit where the girl was walking and the shoes started to break, and she kept walking as if she was in shoes, so she had her foot in the same position. That kind of thing people want to see. That, in fact, maybe not the designer, but the newspapers and the magazines want it. The other thing is how fast the turnaround fill is, because you saw me uploading straight away. Did you not? I was literally at the interval uploading.
You were?
Yeah, because I'm used to that. Get it out. And even then, the person running the show, this is the difference between different shows, was like shocked that she would get the images same day, even within an hour. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of standard in the UK for me when it comes to runway. And the other thing is, we were shooting backstage. I got to shoot backstage briefly when I went to the toilet. They pulled me in. Is that it's rare that you will, as a runway photographer, get pulled into the backstage area. Normally they have people do that. Certain shows allow you. There is no two shows the same. I will say London Fashion Week is never for the faint of heart. I think that is the one where I have run around and gone, "Ah," and I've almost given into my caffeine-free life and gone coffee again. Although I have here today. I think it's great if you want to get into the fashion industry, but I would definitely say start doing some of the smaller runway shows to ease yourself in, because if this is what it's like at a small show, imagine at the big shows. Also, it's quite hard to get press passes for the big shows unless you've got a body of work from the other shows. The other thing, this is a top tip, this is something, when you come into these shows, first of all, some very top tips. Pack as small as possible, only bring what is absolutely necessary. I bring a monopod rather than a tripod. If you need a seat, bring one of those small profile seats. But this is soft skills, Phil. Don't make comment or judgment on any of the garments you're about to see. Isn't that right, Phil?
No comment?
Yeah. Don't ever make comment on the garments or what you're seeing, because one, fashion designers are very precious, rightly so, about their creations. You do not need to be accidentally, unintentionally, perhaps miffing them by making reference to something else. Isn't that right, Phil?
Don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
exactly. Also, remember, and this goes without saying, if you're going backstage, don't photograph the models when they're getting changed. Although people say their models are used to it, I believe there is a line that we don't cross. Although you didn't get to go backstage, I was backstage. I don't do that. Also, don't move, touch anything. Isn't that right, Phil? Yes. So these are things that you might not think about. Also, remember, be nice to everyone. You don't know who they are. But stand your ground equally. Like, I said to the when they said, "Oh, do you want to stand here?" I was like, "Well, you've got another photographer there. There is, what was it? Probably 20 inches of space. And they were going to put 3 of us in it."
Yes.
That's a horrible viewing, but also we are literally going to be shooting the same imagery. I mean, maybe not the same editing style. But that's the other thing. You can't put a heavy, strong editing style on these shots. There are people who do.
Yeah.
And I do a little bit. But you can't be putting like crazy on, because that's what these, when you're shooting runway, it's as is.
Yeah, and you shot very wide, and when I saw your editing, so that
I've got a lot of the audience involved in mine, especially when they do them. I love it when people whip around their mobile phones. The only time I like it, not at a wedding, but I do like it when they've got a mobile phone.
But I think if someone wanted to come into fashion or portrait industry, the first person I would look up is this lady that I'm
Oh,
to.
thanks, babes. Thanks. That's only because you just met me.
No, I've known you 7
So-
years, but the images that she did for me, for my portraiture, when there was nothing going on in the hide. Vic, quick, we got to get your portrait to whoosh bang, outside, inside. Amazing. And as a photographer, that when someone can do that and produces stunning portraiture.
Excuse me, let me just move my chair back so my ego can now fit in the room. Head's getting big, Phil.
You know, but just her advice on portraiture, business, marketing, I would always now look up Khandie, and she's going to regret becoming a week in the hide in Estonia and meeting me.
Regret it. Unless you're going to bury me in your lake.
No, I'm not going to bury you.
I think you did really well. I want to say I had high expectations because I know who you are and what you're like, and even those you exceeded. So I think you've done really, really well. I also think that it was a nice, easy-ish one to get into, and I think that really helped. I honestly, as somebody who has shot in this industry for quite a while, this kind of environment can play quite heavily on people's. I'm going to talk about play, but very heavy on people's mental health, because you show up and there's always, it just feels very no, doesn't it? Sorry, we don't know where you're going. No, we don't know what you want to do. We know we don't know, and that's quite hard. Because then they do that to you, and there's nothing wrong with that, really, because they're busy doing other things. But then you're expected to do all this work for them, and then they're really nice to you afterwards. It's quite a peak and flow relationship.
Yeah, and I think if you've got a sensitive nature, then
I don't know if it's sensitive. I just think
don't go where I don't know if you suddenly get upset because someone.
you can't get upset. You've got to have a little bit of a thicker skin. I know we can all sit around the world and go, oh, everyone should treat everyone really nicely. I think it's really unfair to assume that everyone is going to. People are never rude, but they are short, or they might be direct, because they're in a high stressed environment. There's about to be 300, 400 people coming in, punters who have got massive sway in the industry. And these people are now going. It's almost like make or break of that, because you're only as good as your last runway show.
Like you're only as good as your one last picture. And
Love the dramatic pause then. We're on a podcast, they're going to be like, you're right, Phil, do some caffeine.
Yeah, another caffeine. Another caffeine.
Another cup of coffee, darling. Should we get you another one? On that note, let's end this one.
I didn't get a single coffee.
That's because last time we went, it was cold, and we decided no, we're not paying for hot coffee getting cold.
We're not going on the cold coffee
hunts. So right now, that's day one done. We've got 2 more days to go, and they're at a different venue, so it's going to be a completely different setup. So everything we've learned about the lighting at this venue, we're going to park and potentially draw on it. But the next one when we looked at it's a bit more light and airy. But as we know, don't expect that if we're going to a fashion show.
Never assume anything in photography.
Nope.
And we are at the Estonian National Museum today.
Yeah. So we're gonna have some breakfast, have a coffee, get changed, pack up, and then get out of here. So until then, see us all in the live. Now these are coming out after the show because I think it's only fair. But yes, thank you for listening and to Phil. And we'll do it. Next one we'll do some maybe what you've learned from day 2 at a different location. Say bye, Phil.
Bye, Phil.
I knew you'd do that. Bye.